Tinkerbell is definitely one of those Disney films that I feel is more targeted towards children than it is towards the family. For example, Peter Pan, fantastic family film. Tinkerbell itself is definitely a lot more juvenile and aimed at a slightly younger audience. Me watching it as a fully grown adult, I liked some of it. I didn't think it was that engaging or as interesting. Surprised lack of musical numbers, I was expecting more. But it's not a bad film, it's just maybe perhaps obviously not living up to Peter Pan itself. This was released in 2008, directed by Bradley Raymond, with a screenplay by Jeffrey M. Howard. And the brilliant Mae Whitman voices Tinkerbell. And this is, I guess, an origin story of Tinkerbell. She has joined the fairies, she's learning a trade as a tinker, and she's learning about what all the other fairies do. And there is a lovely bit at the beginning where we're introduced to all the different kinds of fairies. My favourite ones are the season fairies, who move between the seasons. You have the winter fairies, who have these beautiful kind of crystallized icy outfits. That's harder to say than I thought. And I kind of liked finding out the different fairy types. I thought it was very creative, very inventive. Tinkerbell's journey herself, she obviously comes across an antagonist pretty quickly, and we learn that Tinkerbell wants to prove herself as a fairy and prove her worth as a tinker, because tinkers by this particular fairy are looked down on because they're not as important, and I'm putting that in air quotes. So it's a nice story about somebody who is not perhaps seen as being the most important, but is going to prove to people that she has worth and value. And I think that that's a lovely story, and it puts across a lovely message. I think the reason I find this hard to like as much as I would have preferred is that Tinkerbell is quite likeable in this. But in Peter Pan, she's not very likeable at all. So it's a very different kind of personality to what I'm used to as a Peter Pan fan. Of course, it's lovely that she has a nice personality here. Had I, for some reason, seen this before I saw Peter Pan, I guess in terms of timeline that would have made sense, but had I seen this first, I probably would have had a different outlook towards Peter Pan, the film, and I might have actually sided with Tinkerbell instead of Wendy. So it can actually change the way you perceive this character, which is not a bad thing, but it just means that it might be a little bit more awkward to watch if you have these preconceived feelings about Tinkerbell. The voice cast is fantastic. Alongside Mae Whitman, we have Kristen Chenoweth, Raven-Symoné, America Ferrera, Jane Horrocks, Jesse McCartney. Absolutely fantastic. Anjelica Huston voices the Queen. Not the Queen, but Queen Clarion. Really fantastic voice acting. The animation style is actually beautiful. It is really visually gorgeous to look at and really quite stunning. I just think the narrative was... It's a very nice message, but it's not for families. It's definitely for younger children. With regards to the dialogue, the way Tinkerbell speaks, she's a lot more slow and pronounced so that young children can keep up with what's being said. The way that certain cartoon characters will almost dictate what they're saying to the viewer rather than just saying it naturally. That's not a bad thing, of course, it just means it has a slightly more specific audience than, say, Peter Pan. But if you're a fan of Peter Pan, or if you really like Tinkerbell, I'd say give it a watch. It's a different way to view this character, to interpret the character and her surroundings. It's not bad. I don't regret seeing it. I'm kind of glad I've seen it. Can't imagine I'd watch it again, but definitely happy to recommend it.